Mike, one thing I don't think I've had the opportunity to talk to you about is the passing of Slick Leonard. And we've talked a lot with some other people about his impact. And I've kept thinking about it. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to think of someone who has had a bigger impact on athletics as a whole in this state. IU, the Pacers, the saving, the building, and everybody talks about that we wouldn't have Banker's Life and probably wouldn't have had the NFL, but there's so much that goes back to Indianapolis being this little bird back in the 70s. And it is because you look at Louisville, who has desperately tried to get an NBA team. Nashville has gotten an NFL team. Louisville's still Louisville, and these other cities, Cincinnati, St. Louis, surrounded them. They're bigger. They're just grown, and all of them have professional teams.
Yeah, I think that having professional sports here is certainly a significant part of why Indianapolis is what it is. But when I think about Slick, I think about the fact that his career, his life, really. It sort of defines the Indiana basketball experience in a lot of ways. I mean, Oscar Robertson was the greatest basketball figure that this state ever produced. Right. But Oscar left, and I understand why he left. I mean, I'm not
right.
Decision.
He was the greatest player of the state.
He's the greatest figure. Yeah, but he left and did most of his great things elsewhere in Cincinnati, in Milwaukee, etc. Slick grew up here. Was participated in the all class state tournament that was sort of the Hoosiers experience, and then he went to IU and defined the Hoosiers experience that way by winning a national championship, and then eventually comes to Indianapolis and wins multiple and ABA titles with the Pacers, makes them a going concern in a lot of ways. The fact that they were as successful on the floor as they were was a big part of why they survived the merger. I mean, there were teams in bigger cities that didn't survive that merger. The ones that survived were often the ones that were successful on the floor. And I think the fact that he and obviously Roger Brown and Mel Daniels and others and Freddie Lewis made them successful as a team, but he was running the show, and that was and the fact that the Pacers were as good as they were and as successful as they were was a big part of why they were able to transition into the NBA, and transitioning to the NBA, I think, was the game changer for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish, as I was talking in the break, I knew or was more aware of him when I was younger, because I've gotten such an immense respect for him after learning all that I've learned about him. But I also wish that he would have had a little more relationship. Relationship's not the right word, but just notoriety from IU. There was just not, but I think him and Bob Knight were at the same time kind of a thing. And Slick turned this IU job down, I was told, as a matter of fact, also. So you got that. But you talk about two different and dynamic personalities at the same time in this state within 60 miles of each other, coaching basketball. Holy crap. What a time. What a time. Yes. I wish I would have been, I was alive, but I wish I would have been coherent of that in the early 70s. Wow. Right.
Yeah. For me, I lived in Pittsburgh during the 70s. And so I obviously knew who Bob was and followed NCAA basketball. And I knew who Slick was because I followed the ABA. I remember Billy Knight played for the Pacers for a while. And Billy was from Braddock, Pennsylvania, which is where my dad worked. There's a big steel mill there, and that's where he worked. And then Billy played for Pitt. So Billy was someone that really was important to my growth in basketball when I was a teenager. And so I was obviously well aware of the Pacers. Freddie Lewis was from McKeesport, which is the next town over from where I grew up. So those things, you know, connected me to an extent to the Pacers and to being aware of them. So I knew who he was and what he was accomplishing, but I don't think I knew until I moved here in 2014 what a beloved figure he was post coaching career. The announcing and Boom Baby and I didn't really have an awareness of all that until I moved here, and how wonderfully popular he was, what a great figure he was, and how he made his connection to this state's basketball last into his late 80s. Very sorry to see him go. One of the things that endeared him to me is I saw a story, I think on Channel 13 News here in Indy, not long ago, where he sat with his wife and they talked about their relationship. It was a beautiful story. To be able to be that much in love, you know, that many years later, was a wonderful lesson. You know, in addition to all that he, you know, taught us and made us appreciate basketball. You know, I think he got the whole deal. You know, I think he had a good understanding that it goes beyond the court as well.